And we're going to see now what we can do with the first 14 picks in the draft and sort of just talk about, like I said, things that we've been hearing, the way that this might play out. I can pull it up now. I think we can basically make the first 2 picks already.
Yeah, you want to just jump right into it here?
Yeah, we can jump right into it, and we can just make the Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson picks right here at the top of the draft.
And boom.
Okay, so here we are on the clock with the 49ers at number 3. Obviously, the name that everybody is sort of talking about here is Mac Jones out of Alabama, the quarterback, being the pick. And the one thing that I read today, so I've heard this as well, that Mac Jones has just absolutely killed it in the interview room this offseason in the pre-draft process. People in the NFL, scouts, decision makers, calling Mac Jones one of the smartest prospects they've ever spoken with at this point in the draft, in the pre-draft process. And that's sort of what I think the 49ers are being sold on here by head coach Kyle Shanahan. I truly believe that Mac Jones is Shanahan's guy. I think the front office and the scouts and the John Lynch's team are sort of trying to get him to be open to other ideas like Justin Fields, for example, or Trey Lance. But I think that Shanahan is confident that Mac Jones is the guy for him, just the way that he can be machine-like within the pocket, within structure of an offense. I still find it so hard to believe that they gave up all of this to move up for Mac Jones. But I think there's too much smoke at this point for me to make any other pick besides Mac Jones here. Alex, do you agree?
I still, Justin Fields just has so much raw talent. And everything you just said about Mac Jones, I can see that resonating with Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
I just think at a certain point, somebody from the front office has to go down to his office and slap him in the face and say, you got to go with the generational talent that's on the board. Yeah. So, look, I don't want to say it. How do I phrase this? Kyle Shanahan's done dumb things in the past. Certainly. Lost 2 Super Bowls for his teams. I think that his 2 Super Bowl losses, he carries a large amount of the blame for those. So I'll believe it when I see it when they take Mac Jones. I really don't think there's a chance, but it's also Shanahan, so I buy it. So
I think the biggest reason why, and just to wrap this point up about the 49ers, because I think this is the most important junction point of the draft for the Patriots, because San Francisco, to me, is going to like the same guy that the Patriots do, whether it's Mac Jones or Justin Fields. I think that those 2 organizations are like-minded, and I think they're going to feel the same way about whoever the quarterbacks are that are available to them. So I think the other thing with Mac Jones, and I'm not saying that Justin Fields or Trey Lance don't check this box, but with Mac Jones in particular, I think Kyle Shanahan wants to have a quarterback like we used to see with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick in those Football Life documentaries, where they're both sitting in the room with the clicker, with their notebooks out, talking scheme, talking ball, talking philosophy, talking players on the other side of the football that they're going to go up against that week, and just sort of guys that are gym rats and are just sort of obsessed with the game. And I think that that's the vibe that people are getting out of Mac Jones. And that's why, even though the physical tools are nowhere near up there with Justin Fields and Trey Lance, the fact that he is one of those guys that wants to work and wants to grind and wants to watch film and wants to study up on his opponent every single week, I think that that's a real big reason why that Kyle Shanahan and the Niners have fallen in love with Mac Jones. So if you don't have any objections, Alex, let's make Mac Jones here.
I like being right. I don't think Mac Jones is the right pick for San Francisco, but I think he's the pick San Francisco makes.
Yeah.
So there. You mind if I take the lead on this next pick? Because you just mentioned that the third pick is kind of what the draft hinges on for the Patriots. I think the entire draft hinges on this 4th pick. And I actually think the 4th pick, specifically for the Atlanta Falcons, is the best spot to be in this draft. Because Atlanta's kind of in between. Do they want to get the rebuild started and prepare for life after Matt Ryan? Or do they want to give it one more shot knowing that they have, I think we can still call Matt Ryan a top 10 quarterback. He's probably closer to 10 than 5, but I think we can still call him a top 10 quarterback. So and they can trade it. They can trade out too, but they're going to have the choice of 2 of the top 5 quarterbacks or the best player on the board that's not a quarterback, or to trade. I actually think Atlanta makes this pick. And I don't think they take a quarterback. I think Atlanta is going to go for one last shot with Matt Ryan. And in order to do that, they need help in the secondary. In that division, if they want to make a run this year, they need upgrades specifically to their cornerbacks. Patrick Surtain is so good and so NFL ready. I think he just makes so much sense for them right here. So I like Surtain at 4 for the Falcons.
I kind of like that pick as well. And I actually agree that I think the Falcons are going to stay here at 4. But the guy that I wonder if they're going to be so attracted to that they just can't help themselves is Kyle Pitts.
Sure.
Right. And that's really the other name that I think we have to mention is that if we're talking about truly best player available, best guy on the board at this point in the draft, it's either Sewell or it's Pitts. It's one of those two guys for everybody, I think. And Surtain's maybe the best defensive player or defensive prospect on the board because no defensive players have gone yet. I think Atlanta's making this pick because I don't think that there's an obvious trade back candidate to move up for this pick unless the Patriots are going to do it, right? And if the Patriots are going to pull the trigger and move up to 4, then maybe you can talk about it. But a team like the Washington football team, a team like Chicago, that's all the way back in closer to the 20 range, I don't think that that's going to be enough to move. If you're going to move from 20 to 4, you better give up a huge amount of picks to move that far down the draft if you're Atlanta, right? You better be getting something like 3 or 4 future first-round picks if you're the Falcons to move down 16 spots in the draft. I think that's what it is. Or Washington might be 19, so it might be 15 spots. It's somewhere like that. And I just don't think the Falcons, they're not going to get a player like Kyle Pitts. They're not going to get a player like Patrick Surtain 15 picks later. And I think that that's going to be a tough pill for them to swallow unless a team like Detroit or Denver potentially is a sneaky quarterback team like that decides to change their mind and take one of these QBs. I just don't see the candidate to trade back if you're Atlanta. And I would even say going from 4 to 15 is a little bit risky as well.
No, at the end of the day, there's 3 elite tier players on the board: Sewell, Pitts, and Surtain, right? Like you said, the reason why I think they would go with Surtain over Pitts, or at least the reason why I would in that spot, is I think if you are going to go for it and make that run, you really have to be conscious of your entire roster composition, right? And you have Julio Jones, you have Calvin Ridley, right? You have Hayden Hurst. Do they want to get in shootouts with Tom Brady? Is that what they want? Because that's what they're going to have to do if they want to get to where they want to be, right down in that division. Do you want to get in shootouts with, maybe you want to get in shootouts with Jameis Winston, honestly. That's a bad example.
I think the issue is, though, is they just hired Arthur Smith, an offensive-minded coach who had down in Tennessee. He had Jonnu Smith. He had a couple of tight ends there. I just feel like as an offensive-minded coach with Kyle Pitts staring at you in the face, it's just so hard to say no to that, right? It's so difficult to say no to that.
So here's how I think you say no to it. One, Arthur Pitts comes from that Tennessee system, which is run heavy, and the one knock on Pitts, if it's a knock, is his blocking ability, right?
He's not an elite blocker. No, he's more of a guy he's more of a Travis Kelce level blocker than a Gronk level blocker.
I think, right. So I think Hurst is actually the perfect tight end for what Arthur Smith wants to do. I also think, as I lose my train of thought, that I think Surtain's got to be the pick. I lost my train of thought. I had another point.
That's okay.
I think Surtain's the pick. So if you agree, I think Surtain's the pick here.
I think they're going Kyle Pitts here, but I'll let you take Surtain here because at the end of the day, Kyle Pitts is going to be off the board here in a second anyway. So
so interesting. So I actually think he makes it one more pick.
So you think they're going Jamar Chase in Cincinnati?
No, I think they're going Penei Sewell.
That would be honestly, if you look at sort of the process, right? And if you look at the statistics, they would tell you that for a young quarterback, the most important thing is pass protection, not necessarily receivers, right? If you get a quarterback that has decent pass catchers, which I think in Cincinnati with Tyler Boyd and some of the other players that they already have on their roster, and maybe they can get another wide receiver in the second round because remember, it's such a deep wide receiver class, and maybe they can get a guy like an Elijah Moore or Kadarius Toney or Rondell Moore or somebody like that when they pick again in the second round. So I think the best player available is Kyle Pitts. The best wide receiver available is Jamar Chase, certainly. The best player available besides Pitts is obviously Sewell. I can see all different angles from this if you're Cincinnati. I think this is a really difficult decision to make. If Atlanta doesn't take Pitts off the board, you're basically picking between three really gifted players. Right. It's a difficult one to make.
So here's what I would say. It really shouldn't be complicated. You have not just a rookie quarterback, the guy you took first overall is returning from a torn ACL.
Yeah.
Protect that guy. It's that simple. If that guy doesn't have time to throw or he's not healthy enough to be on the field, it doesn't matter who you have as options. You need to make sure that guy's protected. You can get an elite offensive tackle. And then, like you said, there's so many options for pass catchers later in the draft. You're still going to get a very good player. I would go Sewell here. I think that's the pick. I know it like Surtain. I may be leaning a little more towards drafting for need, but again, I actually think Cincinnati's a team that if they play their cards right, they're not going to win a Super Bowl, but they can be competitive. And if Joe Burrow gets hurt, that goes right out the window. So I think the option, like the main focus has to be protecting Joe Burrow. I don't think you can worry about anything else until you know Joe Burrow's blind side is secure.
Yeah, I know. I actually agree with you on this one. I always favor the offensive lineman anyways, but the main reason why is that everybody is, and I think Jamar Chase is a great prospect, and the allure of pairing Jamar Chase back with Joe Burrow after they had so much success in 2019 together, they already are connected at the hip. That's such a great kind of tandem to build on if you're Cincinnati for the next 5 to 10 years. But at the same time, we've talked all draft season about how deep this wide receiver class is. So what's the drop off bigger? Is Penny Sewell to, let's say, Liam Eichenberg or Jalen Mayfield or whoever you can have in the second round, or the wide receiver drop off from Chase to Kadarius Toney? And two different players, obviously, two different styles, but just in terms of the impact on the team, I think we go Sewell here. I'm always team pass protection. So this is a dream scenario if you're the Miami Dolphins.
And I really think they get it. Yeah. So the fall's done, right? We agree the fall's done. This is Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. Miami just got the best player in the draft at 6, which I think is pretty incredible. Maybe that might be hyperbole. Maybe Trevor Lawrence is the best player in the draft. But if Trevor Lawrence isn't the best player in the draft, then Kyle Pitts is.
At the very least, the best non-QB in the draft.
Yeah. So they get him at 6. That's an absolute steal for them. Now here comes the interesting, I think, part of this equation is what does Detroit do with this pick? Because they could take wide receiver here. They could take Jamar Chase, certainly staring at them now the way that we broke this down. That's a great pick for Detroit here at 7 at this point. But trading back a couple of picks with maybe a team that wants to target one of these quarterbacks and still being able to potentially get a wide receiver anyways is also attractive. I think this is where the Patriots start to pick up the phone about Trey Lance or Justin Fields, right? I think this is the point where Bill starts to feel comfortable with making this trade up. You're not going to trade up what San Francisco had to give up to move all the way up to 3. You're probably talking about 1 future first-round pick here in this deal. So really, I think the question is, and there's really an answer for Detroit, but at this point, it's probably Jamar Chase.
Look at this. Their needs bleed over to a second line. Let me throw 2 more options out there for you for Detroit. First off, I'm still not totally convinced they're out on a quarterback. I don't know that they view Jared Goff as a long-term solution and more so view him as a bridge. Right. And if Justin Fields gets to this point, maybe they really like him. They make the pick. Goff is the starter this year, and then you move on to Fields next year. I think that's a possibility. There's one other possibility, too.
Yeah.
What do we know about Dan Campbell? He's kind of nuts, right? He's kind of a lunatic, old school football, right? Remember the thing about biting the kneecaps off?
Is this JC Horn territory? Is that where you're going with
kind of. Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
There's nothing those old school smash mouth football people, as one of them, speaking as one of them, there's nothing those old school smash mouth football people love more than a dominant inside linebacker. And I think Micah Parsons on the board, I think that's who Dan Campbell's going to want. I don't know how much say he's going to have, but I think Dan Campbell's going to pitch a fit here for the team to take Micah Parsons.
Right. The other question is teams like the Chargers, for instance, they're talking about moving up for a tackle at some point in this draft. So Sewell's already off the board. I'm not sure if they move up for Rashawn Slater, if he's worth it to them to move up to at this point, especially the way the board is breaking.
So we're doing trades. I thought we weren't doing trades.
Well, I just wanted to talk.
Okay. Nope, that's fair. Okay.
I do want to have the Patriots stay at 15. I don't want to necessarily trade up and do anything like that. So I think it's really, does Detroit go rogue and take a guy like Micah Parsons, or do they stay chalk and take a guy like Jamar Chase? I think those are the two conversations we're having here.
So to me, it comes down to how much say does Bruce Campbell have? Bruce Campbell, yeah, Bruce Campbell have. Dan Campbell, who's Bruce Campbell?
Yeah, I don't know. But Dan Campbell's
okay. So I think Chase, I mean, they love, since Calvin Johnson, right? They love those big body, physically dominant wide receivers.
Right.
Robert Jones, Kenny Golladay, like that's their guy. So,
and they did just lose Kenny Golladay in free agency, so they kind of have to replace that skill set.
So do we want to put this to the chat, Chase versus Parsons? Because I feel like we're both kind of into
like
both.
Where you're going with Parsons, but I think at this point, at 7, to pass on Jamar Chase is a tough pill to swallow.
Okay, we'll go Jamar Chase then. We'll go Jamar. I think that's what the chat wanted anyway. So here's another team I'm not totally convinced is out on a quarterback. Sam Darnold's on a 1-year deal, and they're probably more in the Kellen Mond territory, right? That second round.
Right.
But if not a quarterback, I think you got to get somebody right away. And I think they have good receivers, but I think you got to get somebody right away, whether it's a tackle or a wide receiver, who's going to make Sam Darnold a better player.
So I think the issue with Carolina is the biggest need that I see for Carolina, other than if you want to make quarterback a need, is corner. But right now, they're a little bit too early for a guy like a J.C. Horn or Caleb Farley. I think that picking either one of those guys in the top 10 is a little bit rich, right? So I think that they are a prime trade back candidate because they are a team that has a couple of different holes. The board is not really going to align with those holes necessarily unless they go wide receiver here, which I agree. I don't think that wide receiver is as big as I know PFF has it up there as a need, but they have Robbie Anderson.
Well, again, you're in that division. It kind of goes to what I said about the Falcons. You're in a division where you need to be able to score. And I think Atlanta has the ammunition where they can afford to go defense. I'm pulling up Carolina's roster right now. I mean, I'm a big Robbie Anderson fan. I am. I actually think he's super underrated. They have him and DJ Moore, but boy, would it be nice. They really don't have much at tight end. Boy, would it be nice to add another piece to that and really come out with the strong 11 personnel.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely would be nice, but is that really the best thing? A lot of guys don't pan out. A lot of guys don't necessarily move the needle as much for the team as they think they're going to. I don't know. If I'm Carolina and I'm running their board, I trade back here. Maybe a team like the Chargers, for instance, want to trade up and secure their tackle.
So do you want to do that? Because we said we weren't going to have the Patriots trade up. The idea is to see what happens if the Patriots stay at 15. But I think you're right. I think it just makes all the sense in the world to trade down here. And I think the Chargers are the team, if I can find them. There they are. So what do we think? Like that? I mean, because it's there's still 2 quarterbacks on the board. I feel like you got to pay for Los Angeles.
So the Chargers are I wonder at what point does the football team and Chicago, they're sitting there at 19 and 20. They could get aggressive. I think New Orleans is too far back still to be aggressive for them.
But I think we agree the Chargers need a quality player. Like they need a top 15 kind of player. Sorry, not the Chargers, the Panthers. I don't think they're moving that far back.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. So maybe I think something like 8, assuming that nobody's calling for the quarterbacks at this point, which is the big assumption. Like, obviously I mentioned a couple of teams, New Orleans, Chicago, the Patriots, obviously Washington, all those teams could be calling for Justin Fields at this point. So it's a tough one to swallow that they're only going to give up 8 and a 3rd round pick, you know what I mean, to move back here or get that if you're Carolina. So okay, let's is this worth it though for the second best tackle in the draft? That's the other question that we have to ask ourselves if you're the Chargers.
Well, I'm trying to see on the trade chart here, and you can actually you can actually do this and it works, and that's probably worth it.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So you're moving
about it.
You're moving up 5 spots and you're moving down about 60, but I think that's about right.
Yeah.
And again, the purpose of this is, I'm just going to force it. The purpose of this is we're trying to see what happens if the Patriots don't trade up. If the Patriots just stay
right, what's going to happen with the first 14 picks ahead of New England? That's the idea here.
Are we taking Slater here?
Yeah, Rashawn Slater at 8.
Yep. Same thing I said about the Bengals. You got to protect the investment.
Yep. Exactly. So here at 9, I think that if Justin Fields is still on the board here, I think Denver's taking Justin Fields. I know your Drew Lock's one of your guys, but I truly feel like if this is the way the board shapes, if you're Denver and you waited all the way to 9, you didn't trade up, you didn't do anything too aggressive, and Justin Fields just falls into your lap, I mean, how do you say no to that? How do you say no?
Here's the thing I will add to this as it relates to the Patriots. If this situation were to play out, I am instantly calling John Elway, offering the 46th pick for Drew Lock. Instant, like
46th pick
before they even report it or whatever. I'm going out and getting Drew Lock. I think Drew Lock actually overperformed last year, given the horrible situation he was put in.
He's got Tim Patrick. He's got Jerry Jeudy. He's got Hamler. I don't think it's a horrible situation.
Jerry Jeudy was hurt a good chunk of the year. He had no offensive line. I would call and try to get Drew Lock from the Broncos.
Okay, well, we're not giving. You can call and offer a 4th-round pick for Drew Lock.
Okay, maybe I got a little excited. This is J.C. Horn, right? They just need a corner. This is J.C. Horn.
I think this could be J.C. Horn. I still think that this is a spot where Dallas would love to trade back as well.
Sure.
If they could trade back for one of these teams going after Trey Lance, maybe this is where a team like Chicago or a team like the football team can make that trade. You know what I mean? And move to 10, because remember the Patrick Mahomes trade, Kansas City was 26 and they moved to 10 or 11. Same with Houston and Deshaun Watson. They were in the 20s. They were a playoff team the year before. They moved to, I think, 10 or 11 as well to draft Deshaun Watson. So at this point in the draft, with Trey Lance still on the board, I think that there's a very good chance, because if you're Dallas, you can probably trade back. Maybe you trade back up a couple of spots later on to make sure that you secure J.C. Horn. But I think J.C. Horn's still going to be on the board in, let's say, 15 through 20. I don't see him coming off before then. So at this point, maybe we make the J.C. Horn pick for them, thinking that that's who they're going to go with anyways. But I think that the player that's going to get drafted in this slot is Trey Lance. I think whether a team will obviously trade up for that pick. And I think it will ultimately be the pick where Trey Lance goes.
Well, here's the thing. Washington's not going to trade with Dallas.
That's fair.
Is what's interesting.
So it could be Chicago. It could be New Orleans. It could be Pittsburgh. Yeah. That's a really good spot for him because he can sit behind Ben, right, for this year. And they're sort of, I wouldn't say similar, but, they're not completely different either in terms of their playing style, in terms of young Ben versus what Trey Lance is. That's a good idea. I don't hate it. They're an aggressive organization too.
And I realize I got that trade backwards, by the way, in the chat. We're rolling through the exercise here. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of what the Mahomes trade was. It was about this, right?
Yeah, Mahomes trade was a future first. Yes, that I believe it was that. I think they only gave up a third. I think it was their pick, the first and a third. I think that was the trade.
Boom.
Yeah.
So there we go. And it automatically took them. Okay. Oh, because we weren't the Steelers. That's right, because they weren't. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are the Giants doing? They could go a lot of different directions.
They could. So maybe the Giants, I think tackle, they could go Darrisaw at this point. It's maybe a few picks too early. I was thinking Darrisaw more in either for the Patriots or that Minnesota pick there at 14. Let's say that they don't go Darrisaw just for these purposes.
Yeah.
I think Micah Parsons could end up here in the Giants. They have some linebackers, but I do think that they miss right now that impact defensive player, right? That guy that kind of changes the complexion of your defense. I think Micah Parsons can be that sort of player for them. So I think Joe Judge gets a guy in Micah Parsons that is going to be an absolute game changer. Now, Joe Judge did coach receivers in New England, so maybe somebody like Devontae Smith is alluring to him at this point. I'm sure he's had some talks with Nick Saban in the past, and maybe he can call up Nick Saban and ask about those two guys, Waddle and Smith. But to me, I think the pick here is Micah Parsons. I think it's a good spot for him. I think that they need that type of player on defense. Their defense in New York with the Giants has been garbage for a long time at this point.
I agree with you. I really want to take Devonta Smith for them here. I do. He reminds me a lot of Odell. There's obviously the sort of Alabama connection, 1 degree of separation, Joe Judge, Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, all of that. But they have a bunch of good receivers, actually. They've built up a decent receiver room, right? They signed Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton. You have Evan Ingram as well. They signed Kyle Rudolph. The only thing I'd say is they do only have Golladay for 1 year, right?
I believe so, but that's the one position that wide receivers, the Giants have actually done very well.
That's true.
With finding wide receivers that organization, because even a guy like you mentioned, Slayton, he was a day 3 pick, and he's a very good player for a day 3 pick, right?
Yeah.
That's a spot that they've been able to find talent at. So I don't know. I just think that they really need to change their defensive mentality and get somebody that's a true playmaker on defense. And I feel like that could be somebody like Micah Parsons. They label edge as a need. I think Micah Parsons can play a little bit of edge as well. So I think that's the pick that if I'm the Giants at this point, I go with Micah.
All right, this has to be a receiver. They're going with Jalen Hurts. I know they said yesterday they're not. They're going with Jalen Hurts. They got to get him some help. They desperately need a pass catcher.
Yeah.
I like Devonta Smith for him because they generally like the more traditional wide receivers.
But they are a big analytics bunch there in Philadelphia.
That is true.
I think the speed of Jalen Waddle is going to pass those boxes for them, right? I think Devonta Smith being 166, all these things are those are turnoffs in analytic systems, right? Those are things that you look at and you say, oh, not for us. We don't want these outliers, so to speak.
Right.
So I think the Eagles, I think Jalen Waddle is a really nice pick for them here at 12. I think that makes a whole lot of sense based off of their sort of organizational approach of team building. They want guys that they can say are dominant college players with dominant measurables. And Jalen Waddle is one of those players. And Devonta Smith just isn't, unfortunately, as good as he is.
All right, so Jalen Waddle goes there. And then do they go back-to-back? Do the Alabama receivers go back-to-back?
I think they were going to go back-to-back at some point anyways, right? Like, I feel like they were either going to go back-to-back in that Detroit, Carolina, and Miami run, or they were going to go back-to-back a little bit later. So, yeah, at this point in the draft, getting Devonta Smith is a pretty big steal, I would say. So,
boom, there we go. And then Minnesota.
So, here's a really interesting one because if Minnesota goes Darrisaw here, which is, I think, a very good possibility because they definitely need offensive line help, it kind of leaves the Patriots in a trade back spot for sure.
No, because J.C. Horn's still on the board.
They could go corner. That's a fair point. Dallas would definitely be annoyed. The other tackle that I would mention really quickly is Elijah Vera Tucker from USC. He's the type of guy, Mike Risa noted that maybe he would be a Patriot target. Versatile, can play inside, can play outside, really good athlete, really technically sound player, very, very impressive on tape. But I think for Minnesota, they also could like Vera Tucker a little bit as well because they are an outside zone heavy scheme. He's the perfect outside zone blocker, right? That he has that athleticism to jump off the ball laterally and move towards the line, parallel to the line of scrimmage and make those reach blocks and things like that. Darrisaw, though, is definitely the cleaner prospect here. I actually think Minnesota would favor Vera Tucker in terms of stylistic preference in their scheme because of they're so zone heavy. I think Darrisaw is more of your power run blocker. So I go Vera Tucker here for Minnesota, but I could also be talked really easily into Darrisaw as well.
I think it's Darrisaw. I do. He's just a better, more NFL ready player right now. They've got to try to win under Kirk Cousins because they can't tank with that contract. So I think you with the more NFL ready player, I think it's Darrisaw.
All right, let's go Darrisaw. I like it. But that definitely, it's in my mind, I think that takes tackle off the board. Unless they're going to trade back here, and we said we weren't going to trade, but unless they're going to trade back here, I just can't justify Vera Tucker at 15. I think he's a good prospect. I think it's a prospect that they would probably get a good player out of for a while, but is he really a top 15 talent sort of prospect in this draft that changes what they want? Zaven Collins trading back and drafting him, I think, is still really attractive. J.C. Horn on the board is obviously extremely attractive as well.
I think it's J.C. Horn. I think that's got to be the pick. He's so similar, at least in terms of, ceiling to Stephon Gilmore and kind of what he can do in his prototype. And I think that's going to be the pick. They need a corner. They know they need a corner. You got to, I said this last week, or maybe I said it on Tuesday, that part of the reason they're in the spot they're in now is they were so good at planning ahead and already having the next guy in the building when it came time to move on from the guy before him.
It's the 2-year thing.
Right. They are staring at the possibility of having to replace both outside corners this time next year. If you already have JC Horn in the building, that just makes next offseason so much easier. You did a great job this offseason so far. Again, we predispose this on what happens if the Patriots don't trade up. So if you don't trade up, you don't get the quarterback. You're not going to reach for Kellen Mond here. You're not going to reach for Kyle Trask here, right? JC Horn just makes next offseason so much easier. So I would say Horn.
I like it. I think JC Horn's a great pick for the Patriots. Somebody, I love that he came out and said that he's better than Patrick Surtain. I think that's hilarious. I think he's that alpha type of mentality. He's a guy that didn't back down from any competition in the SEC, including going up toe-to-toe with Kyle Pitts in some uncomfortable situations for JC Horn, right? He was moving around the formation with Kyle Pitts. Didn't care. Didn't care if he was inside. Didn't care if he was outside. I just think that he is such a Patriot corner, just a tough-nosed, hard-nosed press man, physical in every sense of the word. It's going to play the run, going to play the ball in the air like an alpha dog. I think that's a great pick for the Patriots. And if they do make that pick, we've talked a lot about Stephon Gilmore getting traded. Ian Rappaport has thrown out J.C. Jackson potentially getting traded as well. I think that there's still a scenario, and I know all the top 5 quarterbacks are gone at this point, but maybe they do position themselves on day 2 using one of their corners to get that quarterback that they like. You know, maybe it's Kellen Mond, maybe it's Kyle Trask. I don't know who exactly they would pick out of those guys, but I think that JC Horn, I don't know if anybody would be super excited about corner, but I feel like that's a great pick. Like, he's just a player that is a really, I think, a plug-and-play guy year 1. The Patriots use him as a third corner in year 1, have him play in year 2 as a starter. It's a perfect situation, like you said, to do the Matt Light to Nate Solder thing at cornerback.